In 1851, in Yazoo County, Mississippi, a black boy did something no one expected. He saved the life of the man who sold his mother. Not his friend, not a stranger, his enemy. And what happened next shocked an entire town. Before we continue, tell me this. Which country are you watching from? If you're watching from the USA, especially Mississippi, drop your city's name in the comments right now, because this story begins right where you are. In 1851, Yazoo County was not a place you passed through. It was a place you survived. The land stretched wide and flat, broken only by cotton fields that never seemed to end. White boulders covered the ground like false snow, beautiful from a distance, merciless up close. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and something heavier, fear that had settled into the soil over generations. People here didn't talk much about right or wrong. They talked about ownership, and owned among many others was a black woman named Ruth. Ruth worked on the Carter plantation, rising before the sun and collapsing long after it set. Her hands were cracked, her back permanently bent, but her eyes still carried something dangerous memory. She remembered a time before Yazoo County, before chains, before men decided her worth with ink and paper. Her son, Elijah, remembered none of that. Elijah was born into this world already numbered, already priced, already counted as something less than human. At 12 years old, he had learned when to lower his eyes, when to stay silent, and when to disappear into the background like smoke. But there was one thing Elijah still had: his mother. Every night, no matter how exhausted Ruth was, she would pull Elijah close and whisper stories into his ear. Not fairy tales, not dreams of princes or castles, but lessons. Mercy, she would say softly, is the only thing no one can steal from you. Elijah didn't fully understand those words then. He would. The day Ruth was sold began like every other. The sun rose. Whips cracked. Orders were shouted. But by noon, something had changed. A stranger arrived on horseback, dressed clean, smelling of tobacco and money. He spoke quietly with Edgar Crawford, a landowner known throughout Yazoo County for his cold efficiency. Crawford didn't shout. He didn't curse. He simply decided. By sunset, papers were signed. Ruth stood on the dirt road with her wrists bound, staring at Elijah as if trying to carve his face into her memory. Elijah screamed her name until his throat burned. No one stopped it. No one cared. As the wagon pulled away, Ruth shouted one final thing: "Remember Mercy, my son." That was the last time Elijah saw his mother. From that day forward, something inside Elijah changed. He still worked, still obeyed, still survived, but his eyes no longer looked away. Weeks passed, then months. Yazoo County moved on, as it always did, but Elijah counted every sunrise without Ruth, every night without her voice. And then one evening, on a narrow dirt road outside the town, fate took an unexpected turn. Edgar Crawford was riding alone. The horse spooked. The wheel caught a stone. The carriage overturned violently, throwing Crawford into the ravine below. His leg twisted at an impossible angle. Blood soaked into the dirt. His breathing came in sharp, broken gasps. No one was around, except Elijah. The boy froze. This was the man who sold his mother. The man who destroyed his world with a signature. Elijah could walk away. No one would ever know. He took one step back. Then he heard his mother's voice in his head. "Mercy is the only thing no one can steal from you." Elijah turned back toward the ravine. And in that moment, history shifted. Elijah stood at the edge of the ravine longer than he realized. The world around him felt distant, muted, as if sound itself was afraid to interrupt what was about to happen. The late afternoon sun hung low, staining the Mississippi sky a dull orange, but down below shadows swallowed Edgar Crawford's broken body. The man who owned land, the man who owned people, the man who owned his mother. Crawford lay twisted among rocks and weeds, his once pristine coat torn open, his leg bent in a way that made Elijah's stomach tighten. Blood seeped into the dirt, dark and slow like the land itself was drinking him in. Elijah. The sound crawled up the ravine like a wounded animal. Elijah flinched. Hearing his name spoken by that man felt wrong, like something sacred had been touched with dirty hands. For years, Elijah had only existed as a number, a tool, a shadow that worked and vanished. Crawford never spoke to shadows. Yet now the shadow was standing above him. "Elijah," Crawford said again, coughing violently. "Boy, don't just stand there." The command was weak, hollow, nothing like the sharp, unquestionable orders that once echoed across the plantation fields. Elijah's feet shifted backward. Instinct screamed at him to run. In Yazoo County, survival meant distance. Distance from trouble. Distance from pain. Distance from white men bleeding in the dirt. No one would blame him for leaving. No one would question it. If Crawford died here, they would call it an accident. God's will. Bad luck. The county would sleep easy. Elijah took a step back. And then another. Memories rose uninvited. His mother's hands guiding his when he was small. Her voice, low and steady, cutting through the night. The smell of cotton dust clinging to her hair. "Mercy is the only thing no one can steal from you." Elijah squeezed his eyes shut. "Please," Crawford whispered. The word hit harder than any whip. Please. White men in Yazoo County did not beg. They commanded. They punished. They took. But this man, this god of paper and ink, was begging a black child for his life. Elijah opened his eyes. The ravine looked deeper now, darker. The distance between them felt larger than mere feet. It felt like generations. If I leave, Elijah thought, the world stays the same. The thought frightened him more than Crawford's blood. Slowly, painfully, Elijah stepped forward again. Each step toward the ravine felt like walking against the current of history itself. Loose dirt crumbled beneath his bare feet as he climbed down. Thorns tore at his skin. He barely noticed. His eyes never left Crawford's face. Up close, Edgar Crawford looked smaller, older, mortal. Sweat plastered gray hair to his forehead. His lips trembled. His breathing rattled in his chest like something broken beyond repair. "Careful," Crawford gasped. "My leg." "I know," Elijah said. The sound of his own voice startled him. It was calm, too calm. He knelt beside the man, the smell of iron thick in the air. Blood soaked into the fine fabric of Crawford's trousers. Elijah had never worn anything but clean in his life. "Why are you here?" Crawford asked, eyes darting. "Why didn't you run?" Elijah did not answer. He tore a strip from his shirt, ignoring the rip of fabric and the sting against his skin. He wrapped it tightly around Crawford's leg, hands moving with practiced care. Years of watching injuries in the fields had taught him enough. Crawford screamed. Elijah did not stop. "Don't move," Elijah said again. The words came naturally now. Authority felt strange on his tongue, but right. Crawford collapsed back, gasping. His eyes searched Elijah's face as if trying to understand what kind of creature stood before him. "You hate me," Crawford said. It wasn't a question. Elijah paused, fingers still pressed against the wound. "Yes," he said quietly. The honesty surprised them both. Crawford swallowed hard. "I didn't know she was your mother," he muttered. Elijah's hands froze. The lie sat between them like a corpse. "You knew," Elijah said. "You knew her name. You knew my name." Silence. The wind passed over them, whispering through tall grass, carrying the distant sounds of the plantation voices, tools, life going on as if nothing had happened. "I did what business required," Crawford said finally. "Nothing more." Elijah stood. The ravine seemed to hold its breath. "Business," Elijah repeated. He looked down at the man who had reduced his mother to a transaction. "She sang to me at night," Elijah said. "Did you know that?" Crawford said nothing. "She told me stories so I wouldn't forget who I was," Elijah continued. "Did you put that in your books too?" Crawford closed his eyes. "Finish it," he whispered, "or go." Elijah stared at him. The choice was right there, clearer than it had ever been. He could step away, let the dirt swallow Crawford whole. Let the world balance itself for once. His hand shook, not with fear, with grief. Elijah knelt again. I won't become you, he said. Crawford opened his eyes. What? I won't decide who lives and who dies because it benefits me. The words burned as they left Elijah's mouth. Footsteps echoed in the distance. Voices. Someone was coming. Elijah stood and climbed out of the ravine, his body aching, his chest heavy. He did not look back as white men rushed forward, shouting, cursing, calling for help. No one noticed Elijah walking away. They never did. That night, Elijah lay awake on the hard floor of his cabin. The moonlight crept through cracks in the wood, painting pale lines across his face. He did not dream. He remembered. Somewhere far away, Ruth was still alive, or maybe she wasn't. Elijah did not know. But for the first time since she was taken, something inside him felt whole. Not healed, whole. Yazoo County would wake the next morning unchanged. Fields would be worked. Orders would be given. People would be owned. But a seed had been planted. And seeds, Elijah knew, did not ask permission to grow. Yazoo County did not forget easily. By the next morning, word had spread across the fields, through cabins and courtyards, whispered first by enslaved mouths and then spoken plainly by white ones. Edgar Crawford had lived. Men said it was luck. Some said it was God. A few said nothing at all, their eyes narrowing when they looked at the road where the accident had happened. Elijah heard the news while picking cotton. He did not stop working, did not look up. But his hand slowed, just for a moment. Alive. The word felt heavier than dead ever could. By noon, Crawford was back on the plantation, carried into his house on a wooden door repurposed as a stretcher. His leg was bound, swollen, useless. Doctors came and went, shaking their heads, muttering about infection and permanence. Power, Elijah realized, did not leave a man just because his body failed him. That night, Elijah was summoned. A white overseer stood at the door of the cabin, lantern light cutting harsh lines across his face. Boy, he said, you. Now. The other enslaved people would not meet Elijah's eyes as he stood. Some looked afraid, others curious. A few, very few, looked at him with something close to awe. Elijah followed the man in silence. The big house loomed like a shadow against the night sky, windows glowing warm and gold. Elijah had only been inside once before, and never willingly. The air smelled of medicine and polished wood. Crawford lay in bed, propped up by pillows, his face pale, his eyes sharp. He dismissed the overseer with a flick of his hand. When they were alone, silence filled the room. You saved my life, Crawford said finally. Elijah stood still. Yes, he said. Crawford studied him as if seeing him for the first time, not as property, but as a problem. Why? Crawford asked again. I've thought about it all day. Elijah swallowed. My mother taught me mercy, he said. That's all. Crawford exhaled slowly. Mercy, he repeated. A dangerous thing. Elijah said nothing. After a long pause, Crawford spoke again. What was her name? Elijah's chest tightened. Ruth. The name hung between them. I sold her to Natchez, Crawford said. South of here. Elijah's heart pounded. Alive, or dead? Sold again. Gone. Why are you telling me this? Elijah asked. Crawford's jaw clenched. Because debt, he said, is a form of ownership too. Days passed. Elijah was not punished, not rewarded. He was watched. Crawford ordered Elijah moved from the fields to the house. He called it recovery assistance. Others called it favor. Elijah called it a cage with softer walls. At night, Elijah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing his mother's voice, wondering if mercy had been a mistake. Then, one evening, Crawford spoke words no one in Yazoo County expected. I will bring her back. Elijah froze. If she still lives, Crawford continued, I will buy her. The room spun. Why? Elijah asked, his voice barely steady. Crawford looked away. Because a man must live with what he owes. For the first time since Ruth was taken, hope entered Elijah's chest and terrified him. Weeks later, A wagon arrived. Elijah stood in the dirt road again. History repeating itself. The wagon stopped. A woman stepped down. Older, thinner, but unmistakable. "Ma," Elijah whispered. Ruth's eyes found him, and the world broke open. They held each other like survivors of a war no one would ever write about. Ruth's hands trembled as she touched his face, counting in, confirming he was real. "I remembered mercy," Elijah said into her shoulder. Ruth pulled back, eyes shining with tears. "So did I," she said. Yazoo County washed, and for the first time, it did not know what to say. Yazoo County did not punish mercy openly. It punished it quietly. In the weeks after Ruth's return, nothing was said aloud, but everything changed. The fields grew less forgiving. Orders came sharper. Eyes lingered longer on Elijah than they ever had before. Mercy had been noticed, and Yazoo County did not like being reminded that choice still existed. Ruth felt it first. Women stopped speaking when she passed. Not out of hatred, out of fear. Survival demanded distance from anything unusual, anything that drew attention. A woman sold and returned was both. "You shouldn't have come back," one whispered to her one evening. "This place doesn't forget." Ruth already knew. Crawford never spoke of the ravine again, but he watched, from his porch, from behind papers, from the way he paused whenever Elijah entered a room. Elijah had not been forgiven. He had been remembered. Work grew harder. Small mistakes were punished. Food portions shrank. Nights became shorter. None of it could be protested. None of it left marks a man could be blamed for. This was how Yazoo County corrected imbalance. One afternoon, Elijah overheard two overseers talking near the barns. "Boy thinks he's more than he is," one said. "Mercy like that spreads," the other replied. "Got to cut it off early." Elijah walked away without being seen. That night, Ruth did not sleep. "They will take you," she said, sitting upright in the dark. "Or they will take me again." Elijah said nothing. He had known this moment would come. Crawford summoned him days later. The big house felt colder than before. The walls listened. Crawford sat behind his desk, cane resting against the wood like a warning. "You changed something," Crawford said calmly. "I help you," Elijah replied. "Yes," Crawford said. "And that is the problem." Silence stretched. "There are men asking questions," Crawford continued. "Men who don't like disruption." Elijah's jaw tightened. "What do you want from me?" Crawford leaned forward. "I want this to end," he said. Quietly, outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Elijah understood. Mercy had bought time. Nothing more. That night Ruth packed what little they had. "Not yet," Elijah whispered. "We need the right moment." Ruth looked at her son. "Really looked at him?" "You learned too young," she said. Elijah did not deny it. Beyond their cabin, Yazoo County slept uneasily. And somewhere in that darkness, consequences were already moving. Yazoo County always knew before you did. It knew when something was about to break. It knew when someone was about to run. It knew when mercy had gone too far. The air itself felt tighter in the days after Crawford's warning. Sounds carried farther. Footsteps lingered longer. Even the cotton fields seemed to lean inward, listening. Ruth stopped singing. That was how Elijah knew time was running out. She had sung through hunger, through loss, through chains. Silence meant danger. They spoke only at night now, voices barely above breath. Plans formed slowly, carefully, like something fragile that could shatter if rushed. "We leave when the river fog comes," Elijah whispered. "Before dawn. They won't track well then." Ruth nodded, though fear clouded her eyes. "You shouldn't have had to learn this," she said. Elijah did not answer. He had learned because Yazoo County demanded it. The night they chose was moonless. Fog rolled in thick and low, swallowing the ground, blurring edges, turning the world into shapes instead of truths. It was the kind of night that forgave movement. They slipped from the cabin carrying almost nothing. Papers were hidden against Ruth's skin, wrapped in cloth, protected like a second heart. Behind them, Yazoo County breathed. They did not make it far before voices cut through the fog. "Boy," Elijah froze. Lantern light flared. Weak but enough. Two overseers stepped forward, rifles resting easy in their hands. Not raised, not threatened, certain. "We knew you'd try," one said calmly. "Mercy like yours always thinks it can leave." Ruth stepped in front of Elijah. "Please," he said. The word fell uselessly into the fog. "You're not going anywhere," the man replied. "Orders." From behind them, another figure emerged. Crawford. He walked slowly, cane sinking into wet earth, his face unreadable. "This is far enough," he said. Elijah's chest burned. "You said," Elijah began. "I said mercy had a cost," Crawford interrupted. "This is it." The overseers moved closer. Ruth's hand tightened around Elijah's. Then Crawford raised his hand. "Wait." Silence fell again. Crawford looked at Ruth, really looked at her. "You should have hated me," he said quietly. "Most would." Ruth met his gaze. "I did," she said. "Then I chose not to let it finish me." Something shifted. Not in Yazoo County. In Crawford. He turned to the overseers. "Go," he said. They stared at him. "Sir, go," Crawford repeated. "I'll answer for this." Reluctantly, they stepped back, then vanished into the fog. Crawford faced them once more. "This is all I can give," he said. "After tonight, you do not exist to me." Elijah understood. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't redemption. It was a crack. They walked past him without another word. Yazoo County did not follow. The river took hours to reach. The crossing nearly broke Ruth. Elijah carried her when her legs failed, every step a refusal to stop. By morning, the sun rose on land that did not know their names. They kept walking. Years passed. The world beyond Yazoo County was not kind, but it was different. Ruth worked when she could. Elijah learned letters from a preacher who asked no questions. Words became tools no one could take from him. Mercy did not save the world. It saved them. One evening, long after Ruth's hair had turned silver, Elijah stood beside her watching the sun sink. "Do you regret it now?" she asked. Elijah shook his head. "No," he said, "because even when they owned my body, they never owned my choice." Ruth smiled. "That," she said, "is freedom's first shape." Far away, Yazoo County still stood, but it no longer held them, and it never would again. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Like the video, subscribe to Silent Chains, and share it with someone who believes that mercy still matters. Because some stories aren't just meant to be watched, they're meant to be remembered.